This is the addendum to The Forms of Matter Are Numberless by the Obligate Pedestrian. And yes, I do realise that my editing here requires a little bit of work. I will try to get better. A theme right now, and I will try not to become too obsessive about it, is that the collection of elementary materials has been argued about since at least the time of Thales, and that alchemy, chemistry, as well as quantum theory, are presenting different sets of elementary materials, but are very much of a kind as physical theories. The disagreement is not about being experimental or learning from experience or doing or not doing laboratory work. It is about the details of the collection of the elementary materials, which materials are never created or destroyed. The quantum answer is that all particles can be created and destroyed, but that underneath that there is the quantum field that exists for every time and every place, and the quantum field is that which cannot be created or destroyed. And this is more in tune with Thales and Empedocles than with the theories of atomists such as Lavoisier. But determining which is the right set of elements is a problem, the difficulty of which is often underestimated by those who have been taught in a system of elements developed by the end of the 19th century. It is an extremely difficult task which took centuries of slow progress. Such things as the sulfur-mercury theory of metallurgy were used in practice, and while generally not as good as the 19th century theories in predicting and controlling nature, were nevertheless in their time useful and led to further developments and eventually to the 21st century chemistry by a steady evolution of ideas, not a sudden replacement of the pseudo-scientific with the real scientific. So this is very much the core of the intention of the focus of the essay, The Forms of Matter Are Numberless. Note that Lavoisier had 33 elements, of which only 23 are currently accepted as elements. He had the wrong idea about how acids work, which is why he called oxygen the acid generator. We now have a strongly different view of acids, and we accept around 100 elements, so Lavoisier included ones that we disagree with and misses the bulk of the ones that we do. His collection of elements is not especially different in its abilities compared to that of the phlogiston theory, which was not just the phlogiston theory, but was a large collection of elements that could be used to explain many reactions that could not have been explained a century earlier. At the end of the 19th century, with the development of electromagnetics and the kinetic theory of thermodynamics, as well as a collection of many more and better established elements, the theory was better than either that promoted by Priestley or Lavoisier. Hindsight is 2020. Lemery, in the 1600s, who is often promoted as an early chemist, actually talks about earth, water, air, fire, sulfur, mercury and salt as a foundational context, not hydrogen, helium, lithium and beryllium. That puts him closer to the alchemist than to Lavoisier, but he is called a chemist because he started a theory of acids involving acid-base reactions. But his discussion is logical and rational, as was the discussion of pseudo-Geber in the 1300s. In particular, my reading of the literature in reference to those said in the 21st century to be alchemists and those said to be chemists is that the label is used as an award for agreeing with the 21st century and has very little to do with how rational or empirical the person was. By the 19th century, I see more people talking about experimental elements than simply elements, those materials that have not been broken apart so far, a general recognition that we might never really know what the fundamental materials are. This is strong resonance with the work in particle democracy theory of the 20th century. So, in much of what I am talking about now, I avoid any details of quantum theory, as I believe it is a very different kind of science to any of the chem, alchemy and chemistry that came before, and it was an offshoot of the electromagnetic theory and the theory of electrochemistry. It was a coup for the theories of electricity and magnetism, which up to the start of the 19th century had been more bit players. They now took the leading role. So, for some time yet, I will continue to read out sections of selected but representative books by alchemists and chemists that have given an idea of how people thought, especially in Europe from 1100 to 1900. and how the ideas evolved slowly without the revolution, and at no stage was this about ignorant monkeys who did not know any better, or armchair philosophers who would have seen the error if only they had done a simple check. Later I intend to include non-European material science and non-chemical science, but there is a lot of literature to get through before making any attempt to go in either of these directions, and my expertise is in the European languages, history and science. I have more to learn when it comes to Africa, India, China and the Americas, and that is not an exhaustive list. Thank you for listening. And yes, I do realise it's fairly obvious that I'm reading from a script, but I wrote that script just a few minutes ago, so it is my words. I'll see about doing something about that too. Thank you for listening.